The Galactic Combat Academy buzzed with nervous energy as cadets from 17 different species shuffled into Training Bay 7. The air recyclers worked overtime, struggling to maintain atmospheric balance for the diverse mix of oxygen breathers, methane inhalers, and silicon-based life forms. Captain Vex Thornridge stood at attention, his massive frame casting shadows across the polished metal floor. At 6 feet 4 inches tall, Vex was considered average height for a human. But here, surrounded by the spindly Zaloni with their gossamer wings, the crystalline Quartzians barely reaching his waist, and the slug-like Malari leaving their trademark slime trails, he looked like a walking monument to biological excess. "All right, cadets," barked Instructor Krill, a four-armed vegan whose mandibles click with authority. "Today we practice close-quarters combat techniques. Remember, this is not a death match. We are here to learn, not to create diplomatic incidents." The instructor's compound eyes swept across the assembled group, pausing momentarily on Vex. Word traveled fast in the academy about the human, who had accidentally crushed a Zaloni's delicate wing structure during yesterday's strength assessment. The poor creature was still in the medical bay, wrapped in bioregenerated bandages. "Partner assignments are posted on your neural interfaces." Krill continued. "Begin with basic grappling maneuvers. No striking, no projectile weapons, no plasma discharge. Just simple holds and escapes." Vex checked his assignment and groaned inwardly. His partner was Zek Malthorn, a Korvan warrior whose species prided itself on being the fiercest combatants in the known galaxy. The Korvan stood 7 feet tall on average, with chitinous exoskeletons that could deflect most small arms' fire and razor-sharp claws that could slice through titanium like butter. Zek approached with the swagger of someone who had never lost a fight. His exoskeleton gleamed under the training bay's harsh lighting, and his forearms moved with predatory grace. 2 smaller secondary arms jutted from his torso, while his primary appendages ended in those infamous claws. "So," Zek said, his translator converting his chittering into standard galactic, "I finally get to test myself against a legendary human Deathworlder. This should be enlightening." Vex extended his hand in a universal gesture of sportsmanship. "Looking forward to it, Zek. May the best fighter win." Zek stared at the offered hand with what Vex assumed was amusement, though reading Korvan expressions was like trying to decipher quantum mechanics while drunk. How charmingly primitive. Your species still believes in honorable combat. The other training pairs had already begun their exercises. Vex could hear the gentle whoosh of Zaloni wings, the crystalline chiming of Quartzian limbs connecting, and the wet slapping sounds of Malari attempting anything resembling combat techniques. "Standard grappling rules," Vex said, settling into a basic wrestling stance. "First to achieve submission hold, or pin wins a round." "Agreed," Zek replied, but there was something in his translator's tone that made Vex's survival instincts tingle. They circled each other slowly. Vex had studied Korvan combat techniques during his xenobiology courses. They were ambush predators by nature, preferring quick, decisive strikes to prolonged engagements. Their exoskeletons made them nearly invulnerable to blunt force trauma, but they had weak points at the joints and sensory organs. Zek made the first move, lunging forward with surprising speed. His primary arms reached for Vex's torso, while his secondary arms went high, trying to trap the human's head. It was a classic Korvan maneuver called the Death Embrace. Vex pivoted left, grabbed one of Zek's primary arms, and used the alien's momentum against him. He pulled hard while stepping aside, sending the Korvan stumbling past him. It was a move he had learned in high school wrestling, refined through years of practice. "Interesting," Zek hissed, recovering quickly. "You are not as slow as your species' reputation suggests." "We aim to surprise," Vex replied with a grin. They engaged again, this time more cautiously. Zek's forearms gave him a significant advantage in terms of grabbing opportunities, but they also created more targets for Vex to exploit. The human waited for his opening. It came when Zek overextended during an attempted takedown. Vex slipped behind him, wrapping his arms around the alien's torso in a rear naked choke. But Korvan anatomy was different from human, and what should have been a blood choke merely irritated Zek. The alien's secondary arms reached back, trying to claw at Vex's face. Sharp talons whistled past the human's ears, close enough to part his hair. Getting desperate, Deathworlder? Zek taunted. That was when Zek made his critical error. Instead of continuing to attack with his claws, the Korvan decided to humiliate his opponent. He grabbed a handful of Vex's dark brown hair with his primary right arm and yanked hard, trying to force the human's head back and expose his throat. The reaction was instantaneous. Vex's body moved before his conscious mind registered the threat. 18 years of genetic memory, evolutionary programming, and pure human survival instinct kicked in simultaneously. His right hand shot up, grabbed Zek's wrist just above where the alien's claws met his scalp, and squeezed. The sound was indescribable. It started as a wet cracking, like stepping on bubble wrap filled with pudding. Then came the grinding noise of chitin, being compressed beyond its structural limits. Finally, a sharp snap as bones that had evolved to support creatures 7 feet tall and 300 pounds simply gave up on the grip of a moderately annoyed human. Zek's triumphant hiss turned into a shriek of agony that silenced every other conversation in Training Bay 7. Vex released his grip immediately, stepping back in horror as Zek's severed hand fell to the floor with a wet thud. The Korvan's supposedly invincible exoskeleton hung in twisted fragments around what had once been his wrist. Green ichor spurted from ruptured blood vessels. Medical emergency in Training Bay 7. Instructor Krill's voice boomed through the comm system. Code yellow. Repeat, code yellow. The other cadets formed a wide circle around them, staring in shock at the scene. A Zaloni cadet fainted, her gossamer wings fluttering as she collapsed. One of the Quartzians was making high-pitched chiming sounds that their translator couldn't interpret. The Malari had retreated to the far corner of the room, leaving particularly thick slime trails in their haste to escape. Zek clutched his ruined arm against his chest, his compound eyes wide with disbelief. "That's impossible," he gasped. "Our exoskeletons can withstand plasma rifle fire. They're rated for 15,000 pounds of pressure per square inch." Vex looked down at his own hand, flexing his fingers experimentally. There wasn't a mark on them, not even a bruise. "I'm sorry, Zek. I didn't mean for that to happen. It was just reflex." Reflex. The Korvan's voice rose to a shriek. "You crushed diamond-hard chitin with your bare hands as a reflex?" The medical team burst through the training bay doors, led by Dr. Senna Brightscale, a draconian whose species served as the Academy's primary medical staff. Her scaled hands moved with practiced efficiency as she began emergency treatment on Zek's injury. "What happened here?" she demanded, her golden eyes flickering between the injured Korvan and the bewildered human. "Training accident," Vex said quickly. "We were practicing grappling techniques and—" "He grabbed my hair," Vex continued, his voice barely above a whisper. I reacted." Dr. Brightscale's medical scanner beeped frantically as she examined Zek's wounds. Compound fractures throughout the metacarpal structure, complete severance at the wrist joint, exoskeleton integrity compromised across multiple segments. She looked up at Vex with something approaching awe. "What kind of grip strength does your species possess?" "I honestly don't know," Vex admitted. "We don't really think about it." Instructor Krill had been silent during the medical emergency, but now he stepped forward. His 4 arms gestured dismissively at the other cadets. "Training session concluded. Return to your quarters. Write incident reports. Submit them to Academy Command within the hour." As the crowd dispersed, Krill fixed Vex with a stare that could have melted hull plating. Cadet Thornridge remained behind. Vex watched the medical team carefully load Zek onto an anti-grav stretcher. The Korvan's eyes never left the human's face, and the expression there was no longer pain or shock. It was something much more dangerous. It was calculating fury. "Do you understand what you have just done?" Krill asked once they were alone. "I hurt a fellow cadet during a training exercise," Vex replied. "It was an accident, but I take full responsibility." Krill's mandibles clicked in what Vex had learned was the equivalent of bitter laughter. "You had just humiliated one of the most feared warriors in the galaxy, in front of witnesses. The Korvan military code demands satisfaction for such insults." "Insult? I was defending myself." He grabbed my hair. "Hair? Krill repeated slowly. A bundle of dead protein strands growing from your scalp. And you responded to this minor contact by destroying an appendage that evolution spent millions of years perfecting. Vex was beginning to understand the magnitude of his error. So what happens now? Now! Cadet Thornridge, you learn why humans are classified as a Category 5 Deathworld species, and why the rest of the galaxy both fears and respects your kind. Krill turned toward the exit. Report to Academy Command at 0800 tomorrow. They will want a full debriefing. What about Zek? What about him? His hand will be regenerated within a week. His pride, however, Krill's compound eyes glittered. That may take considerably longer to heal. As Vex left the training bay, he could feel the stares of every alien he passed. Word was already spreading through the Academy's communication networks. By dinner time, every cadet would know the story of how a human had casually dismembered a Korvan warrior over a handful of hair. But Vex had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning of his problems. In his quarters that night, Vex tried to process what had happened. He pulled up his personal files and for the first time really read the section about human physiology. The numbers were staggering. Average grip strength, 800 pounds per square inch. Maximum recorded grip strength, over 2,000 pounds. Bone density, twice that of most galactic species. Muscle fiber efficiency, 3 times galactic average. No, one of the other species looked at humans like walking disasters. His communication device chimed. A message from Academy Command. Report to Disciplinary Review Board tomorrow at 0800. Bring legal representation, if desired. Vex laughed, but there was no humor in it. Legal representation for accidentally being too strong. Only humans would find themselves in this situation. He was still laughing when sleep finally claimed him, but his dreams were filled with the sound of breaking chitin and Zek's calculating stare. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and Vex had the distinct feeling that his problems with the Korvan warrior were far from over. The Academy's corridor seemed longer and more ominous as he drifted off to sleep, and somewhere in the depths of the medical bay, Zek Malthorn was planning his revenge. The Disciplinary Review Board convened in a sterile chamber deep within Academy Command. 3 judges sat behind a curved desk made from polished Andromedan crystal. Admiral Korik Skyweaver, a distinguished avian whose feathers shimmer with age and wisdom. General Thane Ironback, a massive Terran whose cybernetic implants gleamed under the harsh lighting. And Director Yala Mindforge, a ethereal psionic whose thought occasionally leaked into nearby consciousness. Vex stood at attention in the center of the room, wearing his dress uniform with all the precision military training could provide. His legal representation, a sharp-minded Vulcan named Commander Tvara, stood silently beside him. Cadet Thornridge, Admiral Skyweaver began, her melodious voice carrying the weight of decades in command. Yesterday's incident has created quite a stir throughout the Academy. Care to explain your version of events? Director Mindforge's mental voice carried undertones of amusement. Cadet Malthorn has formally challenged you to ritual combat. The challenge was submitted this morning through official diplomatic channels. Vex felt the blood drain from his face. Ma'am, I have no desire to fight Cadet Malthorn again. Yesterday was an accident. Nevertheless, Admiral Skyweaver said, the challenge has been issued and witnessed. Under Galactic Combat Protocols, you have 3 options. Accept the challenge, forfeit your honor and be expelled from the Academy, or claim diplomatic immunity as a protected species. Commander Tvara cleared her throat. What are the terms of the proposed combat? General Ironback consulted his datapad. Traditional Korvan deathmatch. No weapons, no armor. Fight continues until one participant yields or dies. Location, Academy Combat Arena. Time, 48 hours from now. That's barbaric, Vex said. That's Korvan. The general replied with a shrug. Director Mindforge leaned back in her chair. There is, however, one interesting wrinkle to this situation. Cadet Malthorn's medical examination revealed something unprecedented. She gestured, and a holographic display materialized above the table. It showed detailed scans of Zek's injured hand, with measurements and analysis data scrolling alongside. The compression pattern on his exoskeleton indicates a grip strength of approximately 1,800 pounds per square inch. For reference, the strongest recorded grip strength in galactic history belongs to a Titan-class mining robot at 2,000 pounds per square inch. Vex stared at the display. "I'm not a robot." "No," Admiral Skyweaver said softly. "You're something potentially much more dangerous." The implications hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't about disciplinary action for a training accident. This was about what he represented. A walking, talking weapon that looked harmless but could casually dismember trained warriors. "Cadet," General Ironback continued, "your species has been classified as Category 5 Deathworlders for good reason. Your planet's gravity is 3 times galactic standard. Your atmospheric pressure would crush most life forms. Your wildlife includes predators that hunt in packs, toxins that can kill with a single sting, and weather patterns that regularly destroy entire continents." "But that's just Earth," Vex protested. "We're not monsters." "Aren't you?" Director Mindforge asked, her mental voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than accusation. "You lifted weights yesterday that were calibrated for Korvan strength levels. You completed them so easily that you asked for heavier ones. When those ran out, you used 2 sets simultaneously." Commander Tavares stepped in smoothly. "My client's physical capabilities are within normal parameters for his species. If the Academy's training equipment is inadequate for human physiology, that's a facility problem, not a disciplinary issue." Admiral Skyweaver spread her wings slightly, a gesture of conciliation. "Please understand, we're not trying to persecute Cadet Thornridge. We're trying to protect him, and everyone else." "Protect me from what?" "From yourself," General Ironback said bluntly, "and from the consequences of not understanding what you are." The holographic display shifted, showing footage from the previous day. Vex watched himself grab Zek's wrist and squeeze. Even in slow motion, the destruction was horrifying. The chitinous exoskeleton cracked like an eggshell, bones that had evolved to support a Cadet Thornridge. Meet Colonel Sarah Deadshot, formerly of the Terran Special Forces, currently serving as military liaison to the Galactic Defense Council. Colonel Deadshot extended her hand, and Vex shook it cautiously. Her grip was firm but controlled, nothing like the unconscious pressure he had applied to Zek. "Cadet," she said in a voice like ice over steel, "I'm here to teach you something that isn't covered in any Academy manual." "What's that, ma'am?" Her smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. "How to fight like a human without accidentally committing genocide." The next 48 hours were going to be very interesting indeed. As the review board dismissed him, Vex caught a glimpse of the Academy's medical bay through a corridor window. Somewhere in there, Zek Malthorn was recovering from injuries that would have killed most species, planning his revenge against a creature who had hurt him as casually as swatting a fly. The irony wasn't lost on him. In trying to prove he wasn't a monster, Vex was going to have to become exactly what the galaxy feared humans were. But as Colonel Deadshot fell into step beside him, her presence radiating the control lethality of a true predator, Vex realized something important. Maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing.